Welcome everyone to Around the World to Costa Rica. I'm Sheila Budoff with Arlington County's 55 Plus program, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this very special program. This program is being recorded and will be posted on the Arlington County 55 Plus YouTube channel at a later time as time permits. You're viewing this program through the Virtual Center for Active Adults platform. VCAA, Virtual Center for Active Adults, is a partnership of Northern Virginia jurisdictions that provide free virtual programming for older adults and adults with disabilities in our area. I'd like to introduce our speaker, and I'd like to mention that Costa Rica really stands out as a stable, democratic, and peaceful country with stunning natural beauty and strong support for education and environmental conservation. I personally absolutely love Costa Rica, and I am extremely honored and delighted to introduce our very special guest speaker for today, who's going to tell us more about the country. Our speaker for today is none other than Dr. Catalina Crespo Sacho, who is the ambassador of Costa Rica in the United States. And I'd also like to offer my deepest thanks to Minister Counselor Mariana Rosales Aymeric for making this all possible. She is an absolute delight to work with, and I'm just so excited about this program. Dr. Catalina Crespo Sacho is the ambassador of Costa Rica to the United States. She is a human rights specialist with more than 20 years of experience in international development. In 2018, the Costa Rican Congress elected her for a 4-year term as head of the National Human Rights Institution. During that period, the Central American and Caribbean Council of National Human Rights Institutions also elected her as president, where she implemented a regional approach to address the migration crisis. From 2013 to 2018, Ambassador Crespo Sacho worked at the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank on development issues in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. At the World Bank, she worked on violent conflict prevention, where she co-authored the UN and World Bank report called Pathways for Peace, Inclusive Approaches to Preventing Violent Conflict. She has also worked as a gender advisor for governments, including the governments of Costa Rica and Madagascar. Additionally, she collaborated with the private sector on corporate social responsibility. Ambassador Crespo Sacho was a professor at Columbia University and the University of Georgia, where she taught and conducted research on immigration, gender, and education issues. Ambassador Crespo Sacho holds a PhD in sociology of education from the State University of New York at Buffalo, where she attended on a Fulbright scholarship. She holds a master's degree in international education from Framingham State University and a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Monterrey in Costa Rica. Please hold your questions until the end. You're more than welcome to enter your questions in the chat as we go along, but we will address them at the end. And without further ado, I'm going to turn over the program to Ambassador Crespo Sacho.
Good morning, everyone. Muy buenos días. It's a pleasure to be here. But most important, before saying good morning, I want to say pura vida. For the ones who have been to Costa Rica, you know what pura vida means, which is absolutely everything. And I'll tell you what, for the ones who haven't, you can just put pura vida and you will see that that's our typical Costa Rican saying. Pura vida means pure life. But we use it, so hi, we say pura vida. How are you doing? If you're responding well, you say pura vida. Anything, how was the food? Pura vida. Anything related to the positive of, like this was good, I'm doing well, hello to everyone. That means we say pura vida to everything, which is very weird because people ask me, my husband who's American, he's like, why pura vida? I'm like, I don't know. It's just like a nice way of saying, you know, like, oh, I'm good. And I don't know. It's just the way it is, but it's a really nice saying because it means, again, pure life. So thank you so much for joining us here. I think I should be on the other side. I'm almost, you know, I'm getting there a little, 5 more years and I'll be 55 and plus, and I live in Arlington. So next time in a few years, I'll be with you guys there looking this other way. So thank you for joining us. For the ones who want to know a little bit more about Costa Rica, for the ones like Sheila who already have been, and the ones who are thinking about the possibility of going, I've worked and traveled in many countries in the world, and there are some that are just wonderful for many reasons. But Costa Rica is special. Costa Rica is one of those countries where not only the country itself is it's beautiful if you like nature. If you like history and historical cities, maybe Costa Rica, you know, I want to be transparent. Costa Rica is not the place to go. But if you like nature, if you like beaches, if you like forests, Costa Rica is the place. If you like calmness and peacefulness, and if you want to have a really nice, peaceful vacation with kind people, Costa Rica is the place to go. And it's only about 4.5 hours direct flight from here. So it's even better. And the last most important thing, when it's really cold here in January, February, where you're like, oh, it's so cold, it's summer over there. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so let me share my screen with a presentation that I have for you all today. Okay, so what is Costa Rica? Costa Rica, sometimes you think about green and more green and water. That's when you close your eyes and you see nature and you see oceans and lakes and rivers, that is Costa Rica. But what better thing to do than show you a little video of exactly what I'm talking about.
In the jungle, the city jungle, the human works tonight. In the jungle, it's becoming so unexciting. It's stealing, and like it's stealing. A baby, rush hour. If they were you see so early, your birthday never. It's for your back.
So I hope everybody this was a campaign that tourism company made for people from the US that were you know, just wanted a little bit more nature. And the thing is that when people ask me like, oh, is that true that if you go to Costa Rica, you'll see sloths? Yes. Is it true that if you go to Costa Rica, you will see toucans? Probably. If you go to the beach, usually, probably. You will see many, many types of birds. Toucans, you don't see them every day, but you know, there's a high chance of seeing a toucan that just comes to the hotel or the house. Will you see monkeys? Oh, yes. Lots of monkeys. And they will steal your stuff from the beach. If you have a sandwich and they can smell it, they will grab your purse or your bag and take it just to eat the sandwich. Then you'll find your bag somewhere in the middle of the forest. So ideally, in some of the national parks, they will tell you, do not bring food. And that's the reason, not so that you don't eat. It's just that so that they won't get eaten by the monkeys who will steal your stuff just to get the sandwich. So that is Costa Rica. It's a beautiful country. And again, I not only say this as a Costa Rican or the ambassador, but as a person who has been, you know, all over the world, lived in many places, worked in many places. And I don't think in terms of nature, there is no other country so beautiful as Costa Rica, honestly. And if you've been there, you'll see, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But it goes beyond the beauty of the nature, because there are some countries that are also have that beauty. But it's the combination of the beauty of the nature with kind people, but with also just policies, a democracy that believes in environmental issues, that brings strong sustainability and environmental issues, but also believes in human rights and also believes in just doing the right thing. We're one of those few countries that actually walks the talk. But again, let me give you more details and more information about how we walk the talk. Okay, so a little bit of information overall. Costa Rica is a very small country. The capital is San Jose. We're basically the half of Virginia. If you want to kind of organize it in your head, it's half of the size of Virginia. That is Costa Rica, and we have 7 provinces, but we have both oceans. We have the Caribbean Ocean on one side, and then we have the Pacific Ocean on one side, and they're both gorgeous with difference in nature. If you see, the Caribbean is much more lush and just very green, and the other side, it can be lush, but also, you know, there's a dry season. So, you know, keep that in mind whenever you want to go somewhere. The other thing is that we have about a little bit over 5 million people. And out of those 5 million people, 11% are migrants. So we are one of the few countries in the world who has such large number of migrants. And we have been very successful at integrating the migrant population within the society, which also says a lot about the people that live in Costa Rica. So the government, we have a full-fledged democracy, and it's the longest standing democracy in the entire Latin America, which already says quite a bit. We have 1 president and 2 vice presidents. The president cannot be re-elected except for if there's a period in the middle. So the president who is today cannot be re-elected for a second term. He can be re-elected in a second term after another period in the middle or several other periods. So it cannot be consecutive. That's what I mean. And we have 2 vice presidents, also a difference between the United States. And our Congress is just a little bit smaller. Here, it's about 535 overall. In Costa Rica, we have 57. So that's also a little bit smaller, a smaller number. We have several national symbols. Of course, our national flag, the orchids, especially the purple orchid, that's our national flower. If you go to the Guanacaste area, you will see the national tree, which is the Guanacaste tree. And usually you see one tree in the middle of, surrounded by just nothing much, and that huge, majestic tree. And then, of course, I think the animal that we all love is the one here. It's the sloth, which about 2 years ago, it also became a national animal. And if you ever are driving in front of the embassy, you will see one of the spheres of the indigenous spheres that the government of Costa Rica has here, which is the ones that you see here, those spheres. So we have two, but one you can see from outside, which is also a big plus. Our law, it's interesting because we do not allow for oil, for petroleum exploration. We do not allow for example, gold, open mining. And so that is also, there is supposed to be petroleum in Costa Rica. However, the law and the country decided not to go after that because the conservation consequences on biodiversity, it will affect tremendously our nature. And we believe that in the case of Costa Rica, our nature is more valuable than maybe petroleum or other minerals that we can get at. Also, it's important to know that the literacy rate of the country is one of the highest also. It's the highest in Latin America, but it's some of the highest ones in the world. We have about 98% literacy. And our GDP, per capita is right now, as you can see down there in the numbers that we have, the population, the literacy, how big it is. One of the great things that not everybody knows is that Costa Rica, since 1948, abolished the army. So we are one of the few countries in the world in several things. One, that does not have an army. Number two, that 98, 99%, depending on the year, of all our energy comes from renewable sources. That's when I was telling you that we walk the talk. We believe in environment. So then, 98, 99% of our energy comes from renewable sources, and we make an effort to do that. So again, walking the talk is not easy, but Costa Rica, we do it. So when people are like, oh, so what is your Air Force? Well, these are these are it. What are so you don't have any ground troops? No, we don't. We have police, we have civil police, and we have border police and other types of police, but they're all civil police, which is a different training than militaries. Again, we don't have submarines, but we do have, a coastal police that takes care of the coast and makes sure that things are the way they should be. And it is a top tourism destination within, actually around the world. And people who are looking for environmental and biodiversity, Costa Rica is one of the top destinations. You can do anywhere from having big time adventures, which I used to do a long time ago. So I've done what this guy in that picture has done. I didn't like the heights too much, but my friends loved it. So I guess it's a matter of choice. But you can have just the adventure of looking at the hummingbirds, also looking at the butterflies. So that it depends on what you can even have a very peaceful or a very adventurous visit. And we usually have, it's about, you know, in the city, it's about 70 degrees average. Of course, if you go to the beach, it's going to be a little bit hotter, but we either have dry season or rainy season. So it depends on when you're going. You know, what are you going to see a lot of rain, or are you going to see very dry, hotter season? One thing that's also very particular of Costa Rica is that because we don't have an army and we decided to invest that in education and social services, 8% of our entire GDP goes to education, to elementary, secondary, and also university education. And it is free, and high school, up to high school, it is mandatory. So that is important, and that's why we have such a high literacy rate. I don't know if you've seen, the other day I was looking at there's a Netflix show about the blue zones, and Costa Rica is one of the few blue zones in the world. So if you want to take a look at that one and see, you know, what is it that makes people in Costa Rica, specifically in Nicoya, which is the region, what is it that makes them such, you know, to live for such a long time? What is it? So that's important if you want to take a look at more of Costa Rica, and you can see that on Netflix. Another important thing that we have that is the universal health. 10% of GDP from Costa Rica goes to pay for the Social Security, which is, it's paid by the worker, but also by the employer. And it is required by law that as soon as you hire someone, you need to pay into that. That also, what it has done is that there's a national coverage, a health coverage. It is the best ranked national health coverage or a health system in Latin America, and which also makes our life expectancy of 80 years, which is pretty high. It would be interesting to compare that to the US to see what's the life expectancy, and to look at those differences. And in the area of conservation, this is again where we walk the talk. We're a global leader in conservation. We're one of the few countries in the world that 30 years, 40 years ago, compared to today, we have more biodiversity, more green coverage in the country than we did, you know, 30, 40 years ago. And that's usually not the case in the majority of countries. So 26% of our areas of the country are protected areas. And we have 6% of the world's biodiversity in that teeny tiny country. And we are the first country to reverse deforestation. That already by itself, you say like, wow, how did they do it? What is it, you know? And again, it's walking the talk. On the issues of sustainability, I already mentioned that 98, 98, depending on the year, how dry it was, our electricity, it comes from renewable sources. Most of these are water, hydro, but we are also have a little bit of geothermal because we have 9 volcanoes. By the way, if you're thinking about going to Costa Rica, going to Arenal, there's a lot of beautiful volcanoes to go in, the hot water springs and the mud treatments. But Arenal is, you see the mountain, and if you're lucky enough, and the night is, you know, it doesn't have a lot of cloud coverage, you can actually see the lava, the red lava coming out. And then you can see that from, and in the evening, you can go to wherever the hotel you are. Hopefully they will have or hot water springs, or you go to a place where hot water springs, and at night you can sit in the hot water spring with, you know, with a glass of wine or a tea or a coffee, a Costa Rican coffee, obviously, and just look at the majestic volcano. I do have to say that I've been to that volcano many, many, many times, and I've only seen it completely, clear twice, but that's okay. You might be lucky enough. And now one of our aims is to become the first carbon neutral country in the world. And we're pretty good. We're getting there. We're getting there. We were ranked, now I think we're in the top 5 or top 10. We were ranked #1 in Happy Planet Index, one of the happiest planet in the world. So that's also to keep in mind. That was in November of 2017. We're still staying within the top 10, but just keep that in mind, because that it will make a difference if you go there and travel. We have direct flights from the US, from Canada. Again, here, if you get a direct flight, it's only from DC, about 4.5 hours. So that's really nice to just, kind of in a short flight. So we kind of see the Costa Rica as a country of hope, as a country of well-being, as a country of sustainable progress, of respecting nature, of biodiversity. We do work closely with human rights, and we are committed to human rights, but we're also committed within that human rights to the health of the people, physically, mentally, and everything else that requires a social security strong background. When people ask me what are our main exports, most people think that it's like coffee or bananas or pineapples, because most pineapples that you buy at the supermarket, most of them are from Costa Rica. But actually, no, our #1 export in Costa Rica are medical devices. So the high level of education has allowed us to have the skilled group of people that can do medical devices. Intel is in Costa Rica. Now they just announced that they're going to do a huge investment, $1.2 billion for 2024 and 2025. But we have many other companies that do semiconductors and then bring them to the US. So we're part of the manufacturing chain. So which is also things that people would not normally know about Costa Rica. But the overall, Costa Rica is what I just showed you. When you go there, you see the greenery, you see, the food is very simple. I do have to say that Mexico and Peru have wonderful food. Costa Rica is very simple, a lot of fruits, a lot of rice and beans. If you've been there, you have rice and beans for breakfast together, which is called gallo pinto. And you have rice and beans separate for lunch, and rice and beans separate for, of course, that's what the typical Costa Rican eats. So, which I eat that quite often, even here in the US. But it is a country, a magical country to go to, and to really replenish yourself. I hope you can all have the opportunity to go. So Sheila, I don't know if people have any questions.
Yes, we have questions. People have questions in the chat. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it, and I enjoy reliving my experience in Costa Rica. You captured it perfectly. That's just how I remember it. So I'm going to read some of these questions in the chat. A question about how long is the president's term, because you mentioned the president can't serve consecutively, which interestingly is what the governor of Virginia has the same issue. They can only serve once, but then they can serve again if somebody comes in between. But how long is the president's term?
The presidency term is 4 years. Okay. And we elect directly the president. The US has a different system, democratic system. Costa Rica is the people, your vote counts as a specific vote for the presidential election.
So no electoral college to get in the way of the direct representation. Mm-hmm. Another question in response to the fact that Costa Rica does not have an army. What are your means of defense in that case?
It's funny that in my previous job I had to work a lot with armies and just the I did quite a bit of presentations to armed forces officials, and the first thing that they would say is like, how do you defend yourself? That was the first thing. And when you say Costa Rica doesn't have an army, as I explained, it doesn't mean that we do not have a police, but it's a civilian police. It's a civil police as opposed to, it's a completely different training. So we do have a police, we do have a drug police, we do have a border police, we have all that system itself. The thing is that Costa Rica has decided to go through the diplomatic route. We are in between Panama and Nicaragua, and we're also in a complex region, Central America region. So that means that, we're not in an easy overall region. However, until today, and we're hoping that we can still do that forever, we've been good at going through the diplomacy route. But again, that's the experience that Costa Rica has had until now.
And my recollection is that it's safe in comparison to other countries around, that they don't have the drug sales issues. And
we used to not have such a big issue as the rest of Central America. However, we do have to say that drug trafficking has taken over entire Latin America. And that has been a big problem with every country in Latin America. And the problem is, it's a huge problem when countries like what you just said, Sheila, like Shayla, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. If countries like Costa Rica, who've been peaceful, who have not had, drug trafficking problems, now we're starting to see those problems. Then, it's a regional, entire Latin America and the US problem that we do need to do something about it as a region. And when I say a region, I'm not talking North America, Central, no, I'm talking the entire countries in the Americas. So, because we've been seeing quite a bit of issues here in the US with fentanyl and the rest of Latin America. Fentanyl has not become a big problem, but it will be, but other drugs also. And we really need to take care of our people. And when I say our people, is the human beings that live in this wonderful continent.
thank you for that. So we've done our questions in the chat, but I'd like, I was going to say, do we have any questions from that people just want to ask right out? And George has his hand raised, so let's go. George, please ask your question.
Yes. First, I want to thank you for the presentation. And I recognize many of the things because I had the pleasure of visiting Costa Rica many years ago. And I'm not sure what the differences are. I mentioned they are still great on exporting bananas, coffee, and pineapples. So we visited every one of those areas. But I have two areas of concern or wonder. On our trip, we had difficulty getting to the East Coast because the water level in the only canal, and you can only get there by boat. There's no road at that time to the Caribbean side. So you either had to take a boat to get to there or take one of the canals, which was hardly any water. And I think some of the tour companies have stopped going to there. Is there an effort to try to open up that canal or the canals in order to get to the Caribbean?
Hey, George, you are talking about Tortuguero. I've been there many times and it is beautiful. And I remember the last time that I went there, the water level was super low. And it took, instead of like an hour, it took like 2.5 hours to get in a little boat. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
our
But that
luggage had to go on a separate boat.
It always usually goes in a separate one because of the weight, because you're going through rivers, right? At the beginning, you're going through a river, and then you're going through a piece, the part where the river and the ocean mix. But that's not going to the Caribbean side. That's only a little island that's called Tortuguero, where once a year you have the turtles that come every time once a year, and it's an island, so Costa Rica decided not to do a road to get into there, to keep that pristine just nature in it. Costa Rica is not going to dredge the river, because when you dredge the river, there's a whole lot of environmental issues that come with that.
Sure.
So yes, George, regrettably, if you do go to Tortuguero, which is specifically that part in the Caribbean, it's a little island. If you go there, which is worth going, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. If you go in the dry season, yes, it takes 2.5 hours of getting to the island itself, because it's very slow. The boat can get stuck, and then they have to move it and push it. But if you go in the rainy season, then it takes you an hour. But that's the reason.
I was under the impression we were going to the actual East Coast, but maybe not.
No, you did. You did go to the East Coast, to a little island, little part of the East Coast.
Okay.
Of the Caribbean, just a little bit.
Tortuguero.
Look at Tortuguero.
Okay.
That's where you went.
My other question is, real quick, one of the concerns we have in this country is immigration. And I know you have adjacent countries that don't have your level of development. What is the influx from those countries to your country?
So we are, if not, I think we are the only, or maybe one of the very few countries in the world that has migration south to north, like the United States, like Europe, but north to south. And what do I mean with that? We have south to north, all the Venezuelans, the Cubans, Colombians, and now we have quite a bit of Africans, and just like there's a huge migration influx, which is basically what right now we're getting 3,500 people a day coming into Costa Rica.
Wow.
That is a lot of people, 3,500 people a day, which we have to give them, because the law requires to give them any kind of health services, especially if you're underage. The law requires you to get health services to an underage person who is in the Costa Rican territory, regardless of your nationality. So that's if you're a U.S. citizen and are there for traveling, and if you're going there with a child and something happens to the child, the system, if you're an adult, you have to pay for it. But if you're and if you don't have the money to pay for it, the Costa Rican legal system will require underage people, children, to get that services, and of course education, which is also here in the United States. But we have north to south migration. The north to south migration are mainly Nicaraguans who come to Costa Rica, and out of 5 million people, we have around 700,000 Nicaraguans, which is a huge, again, that 11% of migrants that live in Costa Rica, which is a very large number, about 98% are Nicaraguans. So, and they do quite a bit of important work, and they've actually adapted well to the community, the Costa Rican community. They're hard workers that help Costa Rica. It's a win-win. They take remittances back to their family in Nicaragua, but they also contribute to the well-being and the workforce that Costa Rica needs.
Very good.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions? And if you don't want to put your question in the chat, please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask away. Okay.
I understand. I
I'll tell
understand a
you,
lot of
uh-huh.
Americans have retired there too.
Oh,
Yes.
you know what? I didn't tell you a little data that when I tell Americans here, they're like, what? It's like, Costa Rica is probably the only country in the world that we have more Americans living in Costa Rica than Costa Ricans living here. We have about 250,000 US citizens living in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Versus about 170,000 Costa Ricans living in the US. And
And
that
that's
says quite a bit about a country.
and that speaks for the type of country that is.
But also the people who are the first waves were people who were retiring there, and which is still happening. A lot of people who are retiring to Costa Rica, but now it's interesting. There's a lot of families that are moving to Costa Rica. American families that decide, I want a slower pace of life. And I do also, Costa Rica is not a cheap country. Keep that in mind. People think like, oh, no, Costa Rica is expensive. But again, why is it expensive? Because immediately as the law requires any worker in Costa Rica to have a social security, to have a pension plan, and that is paid by the employer and the employee. So that is by law. So of course it makes everything a little bit more expensive, but what you think is like, but that's good, right? Those labor rights and will help a country to be, health system and a healthier and good education, a healthier overall country. So there's a lot of Americans who say, well, you know what, I want to be over there because I know it's a democracy, and then I can buy land there, I can buy a house, and I know that I will, keep it within myself and my family, and that those kinds of economic rights are also important.
I think we're all ready to get on the next flight. I know I would.
Me too. Don't get me wrong, me too. Okay, one important thing. If you're planning on going in October, it rains a lot. Just keep that in mind. So if you are planning on going in October, go where George went. That's the, although it will take you about 2 hours to go to Tortuguero, but you can, the Caribbean side gets a little bit of a drier area in October, and the Pacific side, it rains like crazy. Of course, it's a tropical country. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
We were there in April and went to the Pacific side, and we went up to that volcano that had different levels of intensity as far as heat. That you could go, the higher up you went, the higher the temperature of the pools. But butterflies, holler monkeys, iguanas. It was and bacalls too. Some of them were kind of interesting. The animals we came across, iguanas.
So I hope you can all have a chance to travel or travel again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. This was wonderful. We really appreciate and are very honored by your taking the time to talk with us about Costa Rica. Thank you.
I think I don't know if I love it or maybe I want to go as much as you guys want to go.
We all agree. It's fabulous. Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.